Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Team Compton Radio. Today we have Jordi Sullivan coming back online for his second time here with us. If you don't know who Jordi is, he is a dietitian to some of the biggest names in combat sports. He's recently just been traveling the world up until COVID-19, doing what he does best with, as I said, the biggest names in the sport. Take a listen. If you like what you hear, hit him up, follow him on all of his social media channels. I'll put some links below so you can see. Thanks, guys. Jordi, thanks again for coming on Team Compton Radio. This is your second episode with us. A little bit of a different setting this time. We're in the studio, so to speak, given COVID-19 restrictions and everything that's going on. So, first of all, man, how you been? It's good to see you. What's been happening?
Yeah, Dragon. No, it's good. It's good. Thanks for getting us back on. Still at coffee, but in the comfort of our homes. Yeah. No, it's been all right, man. I don't mind it, to be honest. It's obviously there's a lot going on with it, and it's all a lot of people are really hurting right now. And like in the industry, you and I are in it. It's tough. Like it's tough times. But like you and I were saying off air, there, it's a really good opportunity to get a lot of things going that we've probably had in our back pocket for a while and just been like wanting to do. And it's like, man, I don't know, like you were saying, you've been super productive. Like this last few weeks for me and my team, like we've got a lot done and we had a pretty crazy start to our year. So it was actually fortunate because I was going to take kind of a back seat and step away and let the guys kind of take over the clients. And I had a few big projects that I was going to do anyway. And then kind of this all unfolded and it's given me a good opportunity just to sit down and like, you got no excuse to not get them done. So it hasn't been too bad, but like we were saying, man, everyone's hurting a bit, but getting through with what we can.
Definitely, man. I'm a big believer in all areas of life. Doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes you got to take 2 steps backwards to take 10 steps forwards, right? So it's not ideal, but I think the things that might come out of this will pay dividends in the end, you know? So, but this must be like a huge change of pace for you because like you just said, the start of the year for you, the first couple of months was absolutely crazy. So talk us through, man, what have you been up to, like particularly January, February, early March? I mean, I know you kind of working with the biggest names in the sport at the moment. So kind of give us a bit of an update on where you at, what's new with the Fight Dietitian and where you've been and what you've been doing.
Yeah. The start of the year was super busy, man. So we had all of January was pretty much building and planning for February. So we obviously had UFC Auckland. That was a big clutch for Australia, New Zealand MMA, especially our UFC guys. And so we had who'd we have, like Brad, Kai, and Hooker all on that card. And what we also did was we were organizing a national tour around New Zealand. So myself and then Dan Brown, who's combat sport physio, who's the physio on my team, me, him, and our cameraman went around New Zealand and we just pretty much gave educational seminars. So I spoke about nutrition, healthy weight cutting, what to do in camp, out of camp, etc. And Dan is doing his PhD in concussion research. So he went around and did a lot of testing. He kind of spoke to the guys about concussion, what it is, why it's important to know about it, what are the preventative things. And we're kind of laying out this baseline testing that we want all of our athletes to do. So when we come around and see these guys every 3-4 months or so, we've got this baseline concussion data. So a lot of planning for that. We unfolded that in February. We had the UFC card. That was obviously a very successful week for us, but very busy. And then from there, I think I had something like 6 weeks on the road. And I think I was at home maybe like 4 or 5 days out of that. It was something, I think I went from I had like a conference in Perth and then I went to New Zealand for like prep for that and then had to come back for a day or two, then went back to New Zealand for the fight week. And then I was in New Zealand for the seminar tours for a couple of weeks. And then from there, I came back home for like a day or two. And then I had to go to Vegas with Israel and do that. So I think like all up in 6 weeks, I was home there, like just a few days. So it was super, super busy, but it was a lot going on, but it's nice kind of back. Yeah, I'm not too bad. Like, and I kind of planned that, like I was saying, with all of that comes like a lot of opportunity, which is nice. And I think after we do something like that, business wise, we usually see quite a big influx of clients come in after that. Yep. So obviously, and like we've worked together for quite a while, and it's very time consuming when you're with your clients. And don't get me wrong, like I absolutely love it. That's why I do this. And like, I love working with my clients, but it takes up a lot of your time. So all these other things that I wanted to do, I knew that it was going to be very difficult to do it, once we get this like post busy season influx. So it's kind of been a blessing in disguise, I guess, as bad as that is to say, that we can kind of sit down and like, okay, well, these extra projects that we need to work on, let's do it now while we're not so concentrated with the clients.
Absolutely, man. No, I don't think that that's a bad thing to say. I think no matter what happens in life, when you handle, like when you're given like tough situations or whatever, it is important to find the blessing in every curse. You know what I mean? So this could be, like you said, this could be the toughest thing that our industry, or particularly you and I, might ever face, and from a business perspective, from a personal perspective, our entire lives, right? So it is good to try and find that blessing, and that's the one thing that's going to keep us all sane, is trying to find the things that we can fill in between, and then when the green light comes up again, we can get back to doing what we do, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's right. Hey, it's such a matter of perspective. I think that's something really cool, and I'm very fortunate. I think it's just our industry and working, say, with combat athletes. I always say that, hey, like combat athletes are cut from a different bit of cloth, and it is. There's like, and I know lots of people from different businesses, and they're getting hit really hard. But I'm not saying that they're not helping themselves, but they're probably not doing everything they can. And every fighter, gym owner, every person I know, they've moved to the online space. They're doing whatever they can to keep business going. I think it is. It's just that mental aptitude that you guys have, that mental capacity to always keep pushing and looking for more. And you see it. It's really inspiring, man, to be around. I definitely, like, I pull a lot of energy from that, like talking to guys like yourself, other gym owners, what they're doing and how they're doing. It's very hard not to be motivated.
for sure, man. I think it's that fight or flight, right? So it's like, if you look at it from a physical point of view, where you're in the ring, you're in the cage or whatever, and things don't go your way, you always try and find a plan B, right? You don't just continue to try and do the same thing and hope that it works. You're going to find a plan B. And this is what I was talking to Richie from New Zealand about the other day on the podcast. This is like, you always have to find a way around a problem, right? So, and I think for the things that you learn from fighting translates into your day-to-day life. So I think, like as you said, they're particularly combat sports athletes, or people that own gyms or with that fight background, we know how to find a plan B and we know how to fight. So that's the only thing we know how to do right now, right? So, and that's all we can do, is try and fight for what we love and what we are so passionate about.
Yeah, for sure, man. And like everyone's doing it. And like I said, it's super motivating. Like, and it's hard. Like I say to people, because I work my business from home. When I'm not on the road, I'm at home anyway. And working from home is tough. Like it's a real adjustment thing. Like it probably took me, I'd say like 3 to 4 to 5 months to figure out how to work from home and be efficient at it, because there's always something, hey, it's like, I'll just do the dishes, or I'll just take the dog for a walk, or I'll just do the washing.
You
but
don't
like,
do the dishes, bro. We know.
Yeah, not a chance. Yeah. Maybe not the dishes, but so it's like training yourself to do that. But it's like, it's cool seeing how fast people are adjusting to that and how productive they're being in that environment. Like I said, man, it took me like months to be able to figure out, okay, I'm going to wake up, this is my schedule, I'm going to do this, and I'm not stopping till I get this, and then I'll take lunch, and then I'll do that. It's a real skill, and yeah, it's inspiring to see how fast people are adapting to that.
Absolutely, man. So tell me, bro, I mean, I know everybody is dying to know this. What was it like working probably the biggest fight in combat sports in the last, let's say, 12, 18 months at least, working in New Zealand with the city kickboxing team, working with Israel, working with Brad? Tell me, how is it different working with that elite level athlete? I mean, because we can all see those guys are, you say combat sports athletes are cut from a different cloth, and that's true. But I think guys like that are cut from a different bit of cloth again from the general. I mean, that's what makes them the 1%ers, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, what happens on tour stays on tour, and I get that. But I mean, what's different about working with that elite level, like 1%ers in comparison to still elite level athletes, but not that 1%?
Yeah, it is different. Like, I'm not going to lie. You don't necessarily have, say, the room for error that you have, say, with, if I was working with an amateur or even like a pro that's just starting out, you've kind of got room for error. Say with guys like, say, Israel, we always talk about like high performance and, okay, your diet or your strength conditioning is that extra 1%. But like, man, for like people like, say, me, or just like very amateur everyday people, that doesn't add up to anything. Or like even professionals, like 1%, if the guy you're fighting is more skillful than you, what's that 1% going to do when you're fighting for like the middleweight world champ, or like Volk's fighting for the featherweight world champ, or like you've got Dan Hooker, who's in the most competitive, lightweight competition probably in the world. Those 1% actually add up. So it's like every training session, it's intense. Like from my perspective, it's that room for error. It's like, I've got to be really on point with every training session, especially through fight week. We're still monitoring heart rate. Me and Jack, the other dietitian in my team, are constantly bouncing back ideas. I'm talking to their recovery coach, their strength coach. Like Brad's a great example. He had a weight cut and something didn't go to plan, and we had to adjust on the fly. And it's like, I had a decision at that time. It was like, okay, we've got to go do this because I know we need to do this to move this weight, but there's potential for a performance detriment in here. So in real time, I'm sitting down with his strength conditioning coach 4 days out from the biggest fight from his life and saying, okay, how do we go about this? And like, we got to roll the dice. And like, I think we got it right, but it's a very high pressure situation. And it's different. And I say this to like the younger guys in my team. It's different when there's like a lot of cameras and stuff on you and the whole world is watching. It's like if you got to miss weight on a local show, whatever, like probably chances are, the promoter, it's not that bad. It's not that big a deal. When the whole world is watching and you're making like $1 million for the fight and 30% of your purse is $330,000, there's a lot more pressure. So it's like the numbers where you can kind of be a bit more relaxed, you've got to be really dialed in. And that's like everything that you're eating. It has to be super, super dialed in with these guys. But it is like, especially with city kickboxing, going back to your original question, it's a bit more high stakes. And I think that's a product of Eugene. Eugene's very smart in that he said to me before, he's like, I'm not the smartest person, but I'm smart enough to put myself around the smartest people. So it's a very like elite level team where it's like, I play a very small role, but you're a part of the jigsaw puzzle that Eugene has constructed. And Eugene's got top coaches from all their fields, making sure that his fighters are ticking off all these boxes. And it is, like you said, these guys just think differently. And it's like, it's a collective. I think that's what the difference is. They've got a whole gym with all these support staff, with all these teammates, with all these coaches supporting them. So they're like every step of the way, they're being 100% professional all throughout that camp. And they've got all the people around them pushing them in that direction. I think it's very, very interesting, very cool to see from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, that is cool. I think particularly in the combat sports game, I mean, we've spoken about this on previous podcasts. We've had countless conversations over the years about how it's only in recent times that combat sports athletes are actually conducting themselves as professional athletes. You know what I mean? For a long time, it was like, it was what you did in the gym that mattered. It didn't matter what you ate on the way to the gym. It didn't matter what you ate after the gym. I mean, I remember back in the day seeing people eating a chocolate bar and having a Red Bull as a pre-workout. You know what I mean? And that was considered the done thing to do. So it's cool to see not only the science grow, but see like a lot of people around actually start to take notice of that, which is really cool. So are you on the ground there during their training camp, or do you just come in for fight week, or how does that work?
Yeah. I try to drop in. Like I like to get as much face-to-face time as possible. Just obviously like it helps with that connection with the guys. Like with the Kiwi guys, say City Kickboxing, I'll usually drop in at least twice during their fight camp, and then I'm with them all of fight week. So fight week, we're pretty much, they probably get really sick of me, but I guess I'm the guy bringing their food. So like, it's not too bad. But yeah, during the fight camp, obviously, like, like we're in contact basically every day, checking in every week. Like we're adjusting on the fly. That's the thing about science. And like you said, the science has grown so much. And you always think about like, it's the application of sports science that grows a sport. But the thing is, when you're talking about science, it's not a static system. It's very dynamic. And like the human body is a dynamic system. And so you can have these numbers that say Elliot, that fits Elliot on a Monday, but then you do 3-4 days of hard training, those numbers change. And if like we're checking in like once a week, you could have gone through 2 or 3 changes before I check in with you that next week. So it's like, you've got to kind of be on it like after every session and changing these numbers. And like I said, when you get to these like very high levels where it's like the top 1%, and it's like, maybe it does play a role, maybe it doesn't, you just don't want to take that chance. So you're constantly on these guys. I'm sure you guys get so annoyed with like me harassing for these numbers, but you have to keep changing because it's such a dynamic system, because we want to make sure if there is a 1%, if there's a 0.5%, if there's a 0.1% that we can get from doing this right, you're getting it, because maybe that's the difference between the split decision and you keeping your title and you not.
It's a ripple effect, right? It's like what might seem like the tiniest little bit of detail now on fight night when you're going into the last minute of the third round and you know that it's 50-50. Whoever wins that last minute is probably going to win the fight. You're going to look back and go, probably should have addressed that 0.5%, right? It's like, yeah, it's Pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. And like, that is it. Hey, and that's one thing that I've found from working with like high level professionals is that, and I'll say this, that there are some people who I worked with who have never taken their nutrition seriously until they brought me on, and they were a very high level athlete beforehand. So I'm not like going to sit back and say like you having to get your nutrition right is going to be the difference between you being a high level practitioner in your sport and not being, or same with like strength and conditioning or whatever, like I call it like us support staff. But what I am finding now, and you'd be the same because you do it yourself, is that a high level caliber professional won't take the chance. They won't even give it the chance that, who knows, we're like, I don't even want to know or find out if I can get away with not doing it. I'm just going to have it in my arsenal and go through and do it. That's a huge shift I'm finding. And I'm seeing that like, it's really cool. Like when you get these high level guys like yourself and like the city kickboxing guys, or even the guys from Australia, the UFC fighters there, when they're doing it, you see the younger guys and they see them doing it and they go, hey, like, I want to do that too. I don't want to take that chance. And I think it's going to be really cool as this sport develops. Like, what about the guy that from like when he started training, he just did all this right, and he did it right the whole way through? It's going to be wild, I think, when that happens.
A whole new era of athlete, I think. It's going to be like, it's going to be like, you know, like the NFL, right? So the NFL had such a huge budget and things kept drastically changing. And you look at like what they're doing now versus what they're doing 15, 20 years ago. I mean, combat sports in itself is so different now to like 20 years ago, but I think it's going to take another 15, or maybe not, maybe let's say between 5 and 10 years for the work that we're doing now to fully pay off in the younger generation of athletes. And then there's going to be a whole new breed of killer that's coming through, you know?
Yeah, a perfect example of this. And I just obviously did my own podcast series where I talked to a bunch of these guys, and I got a lot of people on from the UFC PI in Shanghai. And I think that is such a great example of where this sport is going and how to accurately and how to best implement this idea of sports science to progress the athlete. Because these guys have gone into China where there's this huge pool of talent, and they've literally got in technical coaches, they've got in strength conditioning coaches, dietitians, they've got psychologists, sports med, recovery coaches, all in one roof. And they've got this academy of say 24 to 30 people. And I think from talking to them, since in the 12 months that they've been open and these guys have gone through this program where they're literally like monitored 24/7 as professional athletes, they've had like a 92% win rate or something like that. It's just like something phenomenal. It's like a glimpse into, okay, well, if they're doing that there, they're probably building the blueprint. And eventually, because the UFC want to expand the world, it's not like the NFL where, say, the Denver Broncos are going to keep it tucked in. They're going to give it out to the rest of the world to elevate the sport, right? So imagine when this gets out down to Australia and all like the people like me or your coaches and yourself get a handle of that, and then you start putting that into your academy. Then all of a sudden, like your academy builds up, and then this academy builds up. Like the quality of it's going to be insane. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, man, I can't wait for that. So getting a little bit off topic now. Well, not really, but it is the question that everybody wants to know, and I know that you're going to have a field day with this. For years, right, particularly in fighters, particularly in fight week, but in fight camp, there's been this whole thought process that carbohydrates are the enemy, right? So not even from just a fighter's perspective, but from a general population perspective, someone that maybe exercises 2 or 3 times a week. Tell us your opinion based on the science on people that decide to completely cut out carbs from their diet, or like talk us through a little bit how you would structure something around what people are doing in that regard.
Yeah, like carbohydrates is like, it's always like a funny buzz topic. And I guess like the way I think about it is like, I'm a bit of a simpleton. I kind of see the world is not black and gray, but I guess I see it in like, it's like the science, right? Like you've got physiological principles. I know for a fact the body works this way. And yes, there are cases where there might be anomalies and blah, blah, blah. For the most part, there's certain systems that work certain ways within the body. And like when it comes to nutrition, the human body has been designed to take in like 3 macronutrients, right? Like protein, fat, carbohydrates. So your body has all of the mechanisms to deal with carbohydrates, right? Your body, like your brain, runs off like 80% glucose. Don't get me wrong, like carbohydrates is such an interesting topic because I think society has layered on top of this thing like weight loss, and people have to look a certain way. And as a byproduct of us layering this into our society, people have like tried to find something to blame as to why they're not looking a particular way. And for whatever reason, whoever decided it, carbohydrates seem to get the blame. Now, looking at it from like my scientific brain, it's like, okay, what we know about carbohydrates is that all carbohydrates will break down into like a simple sugar. Like you take whatever carbohydrate that is, that's fruit, vegetables, rice, potato, whatever. It breaks down, it goes into that. It goes through a certain pathway, and your body has a number of options. So you break down carbohydrate, goes in your stomach, goes into your blood, starts circling around your blood, and your body goes, okay, do I need that carbohydrate for immediate energy? And your body goes, okay, am I exercising? Am I not? Okay, we are exercising. Let's use it for energy. If we're not, what do we do with it? Our body can like store it away and put it away. Okay, that storage is maybe too full. Okay, maybe not. We'll push it into storage. Like that's just what happens when our body breaks down carbs. You can get more technical and think, say, let's talk about combat athletes, for example, or anyone that exercises. If you do exercise in like a high intense range where your heart rate, say, gets above, let's say the orange and red zone, you're going to use predominantly carbohydrates in that energy system. You're going to use what's called your anaerobic energy system, your glycolytic energy system. To fuel that energy system that your body has spent millions of years evolving to do to keep us on this earth, you need carbohydrates. Yeah. And that's like the reason, that's the reason our body has been designed to process fat, carbs, protein. Our body over millions of years have been designed to use these in the most efficient way. So if you've got this huge energy system that relies on this source, say carbohydrate, if you take that out, you're compromising that. And the reason we go back to say looking a certain way, if you take out carbohydrate, we know certain properties of carbs, say it draws a lot of water in, it plumps you up because you store away, like that second option in the body, you store it away. So when you cut carbohydrates out, you lose a lot of water weight. So I think people get this false presumption that in the short term, you lose all this weight. If you keep cutting out carbohydrates, that'll keep up, where it's not the case. So like one, it's like this false presumption that cutting carbs will lose weight. Two, you're going to sacrifice that energy system. So if you're say a combat athlete and you use that anaerobic glycolytic system a lot, you're going to sacrifice that performance, and you're just not going to be able to, we call it, go into fourth or fifth gear. You're just constantly going to be in first, second, and third.
Yeah.
Lastly, when we're talking about like weight loss and body composition, time and time again, we've had studies and studies and studies that have compared, okay, if we do high fat here, if we do low carbohydrate here, we keep protein, every which combination you could possibly think of, which group loses the most weight. Time and time again, those studies come back. It does not matter about the macronutrient distribution. It matters how many calories you have. So overall, no matter what way you play it up, if you're in a calorie deficit, that group will lose more weight in the long term if you're in a calorie deficit. So then that opens up this whole discussion, which gets very like in the minutia of like how accurate is calories in, calories out. And really like the philosophy I preach is that it's more a case of calories in affects calories out, and diet quality will dictate how well your hormones work and how well you take these foods in and do that. But ultimately, if you want to lose weight, we know that you need to just be in a calorie deficit. You need to be in a calorie deficit, but that overall diet quality of calories in affecting calories out is going to dictate how you can do that over the long term. So like for my brain, scientifically thinking, people saying like cutting out carbs, it just doesn't make sense. Like, and that's like a very, very like short overview of like physiology and nutrition science, but it's like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense just to cut carbohydrates out. All you're doing is one, losing that water weight, two, compromising that performance through that anaerobic and glycolytic system, and three, you're not addressing like what you need to address is like your overall diet quality and overall caloric intake.
For sure, right? So I think something that I've noticed being a personal trainer too is everybody focuses so much on macronutrient content that a lot of people tend to miss micronutrients, right?
Yeah.
So it is like you're saying in a sense there. So if you fit your macros and you hit, say you got to hit 2,000 calories a day, X amount of this, X amount of that. In theory, you could eat McDonald's twice a day and you're still going to, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, you might lose weight, but you're not going to be healthy. There's a difference between skinny and healthy, right?
Yeah, man, I've got such a good example from this. It's so I teach a course and we go over this concept of diet quality, and this is such a good example I use. Is I had this client once, and because I never really give out the macros or the calories just for that purpose when I do meal plans, and this guy figured out what his calories was, how much he needed to eat each day, and what he did was that he just ate like, I think he worked it out to be like 4 Krispy Kremes and a can of Coke. And he's like, that's what I need to eat every day. Yeah, to be in the calorie deficit to lose the weight that, like the deficit that I had set him. He figured it out.
And this guy's an athlete?
He was an athlete. He was I think he was like a bodybuilder or something. So I won't say anymore. But exactly. Faith farm. But over 6 weeks, him doing that every day, he lost weight. Like because he overall he was eating less calories than what his body needed. So he lost weight. But the caveat after 6 weeks is he also started feeling like shit. His performance was terrible. His like sleep was disturbed. His energy like throughout the day. Because when all you're doing is eating a friggin' 3 Krispy Kremes and a can of Coke, there's not a lot of micronutrients going in. So all these micronutrients, your B vitamins, which are essential for energy production, you've got things like essential fatty acids, which are essential for hormone production. All of those things start sliding. So all of a sudden, you're not producing or using that energy as efficiently as possible. You might be down regulating your testosterone, so it's hard for you to get up. You might be down regulating certain processes in your body, and your lipase all of a sudden isn't working. So you're not mobilizing the fat out of your fat cells, yet you're bringing in a lot of fat through your Krispy Kremes, but it's not mobilizing. So you may be losing weight, but you're plumping up these fat cells in the process. So what this guy found himself at 6 to 8 weeks of doing it, he lost the weight, but he was kind of stuffed. He kind of stuffed himself, and it took him probably another 8 weeks to kind of correct this and bring his metabolism, so to speak, back up to par by correcting all these deficiencies. So you're completely right in saying that whole concept of like a calorie, you are correct, but you're not. You know what I mean? Like it's like diet quality is more important.
Yeah, right. That's crazy. So had that fella have done I assume it's a fella, had that client had done a DEXA scan at the start and at the end of his Krispy Kreme crusade, would you have been able to see by the DEXA scan where he lost his weight from? Would he have gone catabolic? Would he have lost muscle mass? Would he have gained body fat, or vice versa? I'm assuming he didn't get a DEXA scan, but based on your knowledge, how do you think that would have played out?
Yeah. So we know that overall body composition, and this is why you find so many people in the physique world and the bodybuilding world preaching the if it fits your macros like concept or mindset, because it's true. Like if you just be in that deficit, regardless of the diet quality, your body will utilize fat and push out, and you will get shred. We know caloric intake is the master controller for body composition. So if he would have absolutely lost body fat, but what he would have also lost is muscle mass. He would have lost a lot of like his hormonal balance would have been absolutely gone to shit. I'm pretty sure he did. He lost some. We didn't do a DEXA, but we were doing body comp scans. He did. He lost a significant amount of muscle mass. He was losing fat, but like not at like a rate that kind of matched the numbers. And he was not happy necessarily. Like period. Like he just felt terrible the whole time. But he lost a lot of muscle mass due to how bad his diet quality was, despite losing like the body fat and technically getting shred.
Yeah, right. You know what, man? I got to give him 10 out of 10 for that, though. Working out that and like commitment to his diet. I mean, that's
Dude,
pretty gangster.
When it was happening, I was like, man, this is like so painful. But in hindsight, everyone has 20/20 vision. In hindsight, like it's such a perfect example. Like at the end of it, I was like, man, I'm going to use this for the rest of my career to explain this concept. So it was kind of good that it happened.
Yeah, that's crazy. So on that note then, so for like you're saying, so energy balance is essentially the key to body composition, weight loss or weight gain, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, what goes around the streets, so to speak, is 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. So half a kilo of fat. So taking that figure, which again, it's a rough figure. How true is that? And if that is true, why can't you say be in 1,000 calorie deficit 7 days a week and lose a kilo of body fat a week for the next 20 weeks and lose 20 kilos?
Yeah. And you know what? In theory, that is correct. Like you should be able to do, I think it's that whatever it is, like negative 500 calories per week should be like half a kilo, or 1,000 should be a kilo a week. And it's based on like principles of like thermodynamics and how we know fat metabolizes, and that it essentially is that if you've got that, we know fat contributes 9 calories per gram. So if you have X amount of fat, that 3,500, blah, 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 divide that by 7. Everyone gets the theory. In theory, it should work. I've never had a single client who's been negative 500 and lost that much weight, because like everything in science, it's not a perfect science. Like I always use an example of like, I don't know if anyone ever did physics. If you throw a ball up in the air, you should be able to calculate like how far it goes up, where it comes down, and where it should land. And like scientists do this pretty close, but like when you learn it and you understand the concept, you ignore, say, air resistance or wind resistance, which is a huge component what goes up and factors in, or like what the composition of that air is that the ball's in.
Yeah.
It's very similar for this concept of like fat, and like you should burn this. It's like in theory, yeah, that should work out, but you're not taking into account everything else that's happening around this. What's happening with this person's hormones? What's their training schedule like? What's their stress levels like? What are they sleeping? What are all these other things doing in this person to dictate how much weight they should lose per week per that calorie deficit? So this is why, like you always use the example, if you get two people on the, say, 1,800 calorie diet, you get two very different results, because that body, going back to that thing that science is so dynamic, your body is completely different to mine, which is completely different to Bob's, completely different to Jill. So like that number is just a concept, right? It's a concept, and it's very difficult to apply that concept in real time. Like you see this a lot in science where it works in the test tube, put the test tube in a human body, it doesn't actually play out that way.
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense. So when you're talking calorie deficit, right? For your average person that says, you know what, okay, in that case, I know roughly I burn my resting metabolic rate, let's say is 1,500. So they say, I'm going to do 500 calories worth of exercise a day, and I'm going to put myself, I'm only going to eat 500 calories. Where does that fall over? I mean, because I know right now, especially people are in lockdown, they're not seeing their trainers, they're not talking to people about what they're actually doing. They're kind of like YOLOing it, so to speak, trying to find their own way. Where does that fall over in terms of general health?
Yeah, so it's gonna fall if you're under eating what you need to. Like you're going to go into what we call a negative energy balance, right? So if you say 1,500, your body, let's say you need 1,500 calories, you do 500 calories of exercise, let's say, so that brings us to say you need 2,000 calories, and then you're only eating, let's say, 500 calories. So you in a 1,500 deficit. Now keep in mind, your body needs energy to digest food. Your body needs energy to do what we're doing right now, like all our hand movements, moving around. We call it like our NEAT, which is a non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is essentially like all the other crap that you need to do without your day that isn't exercise. Yep. So that'll take up another bunch. So now we're not only in, say, a 1,500 calorie deficit, we're in, say, a 2,000 calorie deficit. So there's two things you need to talk about here is that, one, you'll be in a huge deficit, and that has the potential over a set period of time to put you in what we call negative energy balance. And that negative energy balance is when your body is not getting enough energy over time. And that's when you start seeing, like our Krispy Kreme friend, you start seeing like all this like hormones go down, your energy goes down, your sleep quality goes, because you literally do not have the energy for your brain to function properly, for your cells to function properly, for your organs to do their job. We call that energy deficiency, like relative energy deficiency. But in saying that, the human body survived millions of years, and it's what we're finding now in the research, and this is very applicable to fighters, is that you've got a duration that you can withhold that with minimal side effects. And it just so happens that there's new research coming out of the UK who's looked at this in fighters. 8 weeks seems to be that tipping point. Okay, right. So like we could all sit at home for like and be in this terrible energy. But if you correct it within 8 weeks and, you eat back up and make up the differences, you'll probably come out pretty unscathed. Yep. So there's that aspect that you do that. the other aspect is like, so if someone's sitting at home and they're like, okay, how do I maintain this? Yeah, you could do that. You could potentially fall down there. You're probably not. The other aspect is that your body's really smart, and that NEAT that I was talking about, that energy that your body burns without you knowing, and kind of is very adjustable. So like if we say to someone, your metabolic rate is 1500, what your body is probably, it's anywhere between 1200 and 1800. And your body, you think of it like a thermostat. So if you eat more on that day, your body is probably going to wind that up to the higher end because it wants to like stay as it is. It doesn't want to use its precious fat reserves. It doesn't want you burning any extra energy. So if we're sitting at home and in lockdown doing whatever we do, minimal training, and say we eat, say we need 2000, like we said before, and we eat 2200, our body will probably just turn that stat up. And without us even notice, we'll start doing all this, or we'll kind of get up more and we'll maybe sweat, our body temperature will go up a little bit, and we'll probably burn that. There's studies that have shown that will happen up to even 1,000 calories in surplus, that you can eat 1,000 calories in surplus and that thermostat will turn up and you won't put on any weight, you'll maintain. Same as it going the other direction, that if you're sitting at home and you're just eating like very minimal, your body will likely turn the thermostat down. Your core body temperature may slightly dip. You won't be as active. That fidgeting that you seem to always do will stop. All these things subconsciously you probably don't take a lot of notice of will slow down. So it's an interesting little balancing act when you come to the discussion. And like the next question is always like, well, how do I lose weight then? And it's like, well, you need, yeah, it's like you need to, well, that's where you need to start playing around. And like, that's where diet quality comes into it. And you have this discussion of like, well, we know your body's going to do this thermostat thing. So what we need to do is just make sure that your body's got everything possible to realize that it's in like a fine state, that all the hormones are working properly, all the hormones that you need to store fat away in your fat cells and then push them out and metabolize carbohydrates and get all your micronutrients for everything else that's going on. That's all working well. And you just tip your body into a bit of a deficit. And then you do it over time, because we know that we have that resistance to it, that your body can be in that deficit for a while and not much go on. That's why we always talk about it's consistency over time, like skin in the game is what's going to happen. It's like, that's why diets, like 8-week diets don't work and you put on so much weight, because you just like hang out that 8 weeks and bang, straight up here. So if you can do that in that little bit of deficit for 8 weeks, 16 weeks, 32 weeks, whatever, you're going to get that weight loss long term.
For sure. And then obviously homeostasis kicks in on that, right? So if you're in like, let's say you follow that for 12 months and you drop 20 kilos, your weight at the end of that 12 months is going to be your new homeostasis, meaning what your body wants to hang at, right? So then your thermostat will readjust to that. Correct?
Exactly. So that range of what was our metabolic rate, so to speak, will likely shift. And it's like that shifting of that metabolic rate, we don't really know why. Like there used to be that old saying that I'm guilty of saying this when I was younger, and it's only recently that a good amount of research has come out to just prove this. When people say, oh, if I put on more muscle mass, I'll have a higher metabolic rate. And that's not the case. Like we've shown that like that doesn't really affect it. It's, I think in my, like this is anecdotal and hearsay and how it works in my brain, having more muscle will contribute you to say having a higher one, but it's not necessarily the muscle that's doing that. It's all the metabolic processes that are involved in having that muscle and all these other things that are going on in your body as a secondary result of having that more muscle. Same as if you adjust and you lose weight and you reset this down, you've probably changed all these things out here that has caused your body to say, okay, we need to adjust. We'll bring this down up here or down up here. And that, that can get quite complicated and a bit of a mind fuck.
Sure. So in theory then, let's say you gain 20 kilos of body fat, right? No muscle or body fat. In theory, your NEAT will increase because of the extra weight that you're carrying around, or no?
It could, in theory. So like in theory, if you've put on 20 kilos and you've eaten a lot, like you've been in a surplus for a long time, let's just say like you've put on whatever amount of weight over time, it's likely that you're just eating 2+ in a surplus. Your body's probably adjusted the thermostat and gone up here, and you've just gone well beyond that. And you've just kept going well beyond that over time. The other thing that is like, it's like a cruel, vicious cycle in terms of like body fat, and that is that we know that as you put on more body fat, it's easier for you to put on body fat, because it's harder for your body to regulate. And this is the whole crux of the argument of what we call metabolic syndrome. And it sits at the base of like type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, chronic kidney, all these diseases, is that as you get like higher up in your body fat percentage, you become what we call like resistant to a lot of the hormones that work in your body. You would have heard the term like insulin resistant, which is like a pre-diabetes. And then a big one is what we call leptin resistance, which is like the leptin, the signaling in your brain that tells you that, hey, you're full, stop eating. You become resistant to that action as you put on more body fat. So these people, not only are they putting on body fat, they're getting more resistant to leptin saying, hey, stop eating, you're full. So they never get that signal saying, hey, you're full. So not only are they eating well plus their gauge, they're never full. So they're always going to just keep eating more. Add on top of that the insulin resistance, where they're not putting away the broken down carbohydrates and storing them away or metabolizing them. Because they're resistant, it's just floating around and your body's storing that as fat. So it's like this vicious cycle just continues to go on, and it's cruel. And that's the crux of the obesity epidemic. And that's why so many people, because it's like pushing a boulder downhill, because once it starts going and gets momentum, it's very hard to stop that and then push it back uphill.
Yeah, for sure. That makes complete sense. That's crazy. So in that regard, like you said, the leptin response, right? So over time, just because this stuff fascinates me, I've read about different things, right? So tell me your thoughts of mindful eating. And would mindful eating somewhat, because I mean, the things that I've read, which are probably complete bro science, so don't quote me on this, but it takes 7 minutes for a message to get from your gut to your brain to tell you that you're full, right?
Yeah.
This is again, I've probably read this in Men's Health or something crazy. It's probably so far from the truth. So for people that are struggling to always feel full, they're probably not getting, like you said, that leptin response, right? So things like mindful eating or like drinking large glasses of water before they eat to try and get that feeling of fullness, things like that. Would that help in that regard, or probably not?
Yeah. There's two ways you can answer this question. There's like the physiological signs, and this is something that I do very much with my athletes, especially when we're cutting a lot of weight and you need them to feel fuller for longer. And then there's the psychological side, which I can like comment on, but I'm by no means an expert on it. Physiologically, you're correct. So that signal, I'm not quite sure on the exact number, if it's 7 minutes, 20 minutes, decide the point, number of time, the time is arbitrary. That is through the action of something called cholecystokinin, which is released from your stomach. So when you eat, say, a food that is high in protein or fat or carbohydrates to a small degree, but nowhere near as much as protein or fat, you put that food in your stomach, and then there's a response. There's something that goes off, and cholecystokinin is a short-term acting appetite control hormone, which goes to your brain and says, hey, you've got food in here, relax, it's all good. But by the time you eat that food and it comes at, there is a set amount of time. I usually tell people between 15 and 20 minutes it takes that. And I always use the example, say, if you go to like a buffet, a pasta buffet, you can just smash heaps and heaps of pasta because you're not getting that short-term cholecystokinin or CCK response because carbohydrates don't elicit it. But when you're at a nice restaurant, you eat a good steak, you get that really fast. You never finish that steak 10, 15 minutes later and go, wow, you're not completely full, but you're like, I'm content. And that's that action of cholecystokinin. So what you can do in terms of like mindful practices or things that you can do to help that satiation response and feel fuller is like get foods that work in that cholecystokinin. So like that's why a lot of the time I get you guys in between meals getting high protein foods or protein and fats together, because we know that gives your body. This is twofold though, because if you get someone who is up, like we're talking, that higher gauge, and they're in that resistant state, they're probably resistant to the action of cholecystokinin. So it's like, even if you do this to them, you're probably not going to get. But guys like yourself who are very athletic and very fit, that's a powerful tool that you can use in the short term to help control that satiation. Psychological eating and like mindful eating, I think there is so much merit in it. And I think there's, right to the point, I'm sure you heard of the concept of like the mouth swish, like when you put like Gatorade and you swish it around your mouth and spit it out. And it's like meant to signal, like, the research on that is very, very twofold, but I think absolutely by just it's pure placebo effect, right? Like a placebo if it gets an effect, regardless if it did anything, it got an effect.
Yep.
So it's like, by you concentrating on this like thing in your mouth, if you trick yourself into thinking you got more energy, you're probably going to get a better performance. Same with like your eating. If you take the time to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to have a glass of water. I'm going to recognize like what that feels like what that feeling of full feels like. And this is something I do with my guys. Like, what is feeling full? Like, eat your steak and understand what that feeling is when you're like satiated, but you're not full, and compare that to when your stomach's about to burst after you've just nailed 100 cheesy breads in the salad bar at Sizzler. It's a completely different feeling. So like sitting down, having water with your meal and feeling that, and then eating, and okay, recognize I've got to this feeling. Let's put the plate and fork down, sit here for 5 minutes, engage in conversation. How do you feel now? That definitely works. That absolutely works. How easy it is to get people to do that and to like do it yourself. Probably I'm not the best person to comment on it, but it's like, you would know as an athlete, you probably have better insight to it. It's difficult. Like, it's very difficult to do that, but I do think there is a lot of merit in it.
It is difficult. So I'll let out one of my little secrets, right? So years and years ago, I was fighting. I was professional, but I went down to a division that I should never have fought in, right? It was way too light, and I knew that at the time, but it was a huge opportunity. So I said, I'm going to do it. Let's just see how we go. So the little trick that I had to be able to make weight was I never felt full whenever I ate, because it would literally, I would live off 2 pieces of broccoli and maybe a protein shake, or like, it was ridiculous. And this is back before combat sports had dietitians and nutritionists, and you know, I mean, it was fully bro science, right? It was like, you just do what it takes to get it done. So a little trick that I used to do is I used to get Metamucil, and I would make a protein shaker full of Metamucil, and I would scull it in one hit, 30 minutes before I would eat any meal. So then, 20 to 30 minutes, right? So then I'd always feel like I'd finish like the smallest meal, and I'd be like, oh, I can't eat another thing, because the fiber in the Metamucil would obviously attract more water in my gut and would spread, and then I'd feel full. So it is like, it is such a hard, like, now I would never do that. I would be like, no, I'll find something else that I can eat that's calorie free, like, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like I did that because I knew that I had a huge opportunity, and that wasn't just in fight camp. I literally had to live like that 24/7 to be able to maintain a reasonable weight, to be able to start fight camp to be able to make weight for that category, right? So I get it, man. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and like, to that point, this is something you deal with a lot, especially like in what we do when you're cutting weight. It's like this acute response, and then like the overall chronic response. Like, especially like guys like you, and we work together like a number of fight camps, I can really hone in and focus on like the chronic response, which is like, and when I say the chronic response, what I mean is like you getting used to that feeling of what CCK feels like, and making sure your leptin response is really good. So if we've worked together for a while, and I've been, sneakily putting in these practices for you to do, I'm pretty confident that if I say, hey, Elliot, I just need you to, like, these last couple of weeks, think about your food a bit more. And like, when we have this protein shake, this is why we're doing it. I'm pretty confident your body, because we've done this over a period of time in the chronic sense, it's probably going to work the way I want it to. Whereas like something like that with the Metamucil, it's like an acute short-term fix, where it's like, it's just a pile of fiber, and you're not really working on this like overall concept. It's like a real Band-Aid approach. And
100%.
like with all Band-Aid approaches, it's like, yeah, it might work for like a couple of weeks, but man, that would suck. Like, it's going to, eventually your body's going to figure it out and be like, hey dude, you haven't really been giving me many calories, like much sustenance, no nutrients. Like, what's going on? Like, cut out this Metamucil stuff and give me something decent. So it's like, yeah, you definitely identifying like those acute and chronic strategies.
Yeah, definitely. And to be fair, I was young, and it made me very sick. I ended up like, I just completely crashed and just fell apart for a good couple of months. It took me a little while to kind of rebuild myself, So I don't recommend that on the record. So look, I know that I'm taking up a heap of your time. I just got a couple more questions for you, if that's cool.
Yeah, shoot through for sure.
And I know you're going to fly through these pretty quickly. So just for everyone that's out there, there seems to be a thought process of different sports need to eat different foods, different micronutrients, macronutrients, and things like that. So A, is it true? And B, how would you go about approaching a meal? I don't like to use the word diet. Let's say a nutrition plan for say a kickboxer who's got that like real high aerobic sort of anaerobic sort of threshold versus someone, let's say a jiu-jitsu guy who's a bit more slow and methodical, or that like with the different energy systems, and an MMA guy that's kind of like a blend of the two? How do you put something together to suit each individual athlete, or does it not matter? Is it just basically like you said, as long as you're hitting your targets and it comes together?
Yeah, that's an awesome question because it brings up two good points. And it's like, firstly, yes, there is absolutely, when we're talking about performance nutrition, you want to try and dial this in for the needs. So if you're, like I was saying, that very high glycolytic system, you want to flood it with carbohydrates, you want to do that. In saying that, you've got to remember in these weight-based sports, a big focus of these fight camps is cutting weight and weight loss. So when that is a consideration, all of that really comes in, and the importance of that is really important because you're watching calories very closely, and you want your athlete to get the most out of their training session with just the bare minimum or the necessary amount of calories to hit their weight goal. So identifying the difference between a wrestling dominant person who's going to be spending more energy and more carbs in wrestling as opposed to someone who does more jiu-jitsu, that's really important. So like, yes, you definitely want to carb match with that higher system. And then outside of those times, you want to do fats and proteins and all of that. Outside of that time when you're not looking to lose weight, and this is something that like I talk extensively with like other experts, you kind of do want that more blanket approach because you want to safeguard your diet quality and make sure that all your micronutrients and everything that you've got for your recovery process, for your sleep, for your energy systems between sessions, you want to make sure that's all covered and ticked off. So like, and you're not necessarily watching your weight. So even if you get the calories a little bit over, you've at least ticked all the boxes. So in a fight camp sense, yeah, absolutely. You want to be periodizing and matching as closely for style. In a more general sense, outside of it, not really. Like you want to just make sure that, and this would go for every sport, that you're getting good complex carbohydrates, lots of plants, lots of protein. You're getting all those micronutrients in, you're eating minimally processed foods to do this. So I guess that's like a very quick run through, but yes, losing weight, probably have to match it very closely. If not, and you're just working on other things, then blanket approach, like make sure you're just getting everything in.
Cool. Perfect. I knew you'd fly through that. Okay. Last one. And I know this one's probably going to be hard for you to answer. So obviously just kind of fit it in as best as you can. It's a blanket question, so it's hard, right? But what would be your number one advice for anyone? Doesn't matter if they're a professional athlete, stay at home, working from their desk, particularly during this lockdown period. What would be your number one advice from a nutrition and health point of view to anyone that's kind of just trying to remain healthy in all of this, both physically and mentally?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome question. What I've been telling people, like through all this, is like, one, it's probably not the best time to try and get a six pack if you don't already have a six pack. There's probably a bit more other things in the world that's going on that deserves your attention other than that. But in saying that, it's no excuse to just go completely off the window. So what I've been saying like to a lot of my guys is like, use like a Monday to Saturday principle, give your week structure. So same as like with your work, like if you're at home, give your day a structure and plan your eating around a structure. So have breakfast, lunch, dinner, same time, snacks. Don't deviate and go like into holiday mode where you're just free ranging and eating and grazing. Give yourself structure each day. Like give yourself a goal. Like, do you want to weight maintain? Do you want to put on weight? Like this is like a cool opportunity for a lot of people. If you want to like build muscle, you can kind of go in a calorie surplus and like do, like if you have access to a weights room, a lot of the weights that you can't do when you're doing all your technical training and things like that. So it's like identify your goal, give yourself structure. And this is the biggest one, prepare. Like Uber Eats and everything is so easy right now because like you don't have to, but no one has an excuse because you're at home and you can prep. Like Monday to Saturday, be pretty strict on that plan. Prep your breakfast, prep your lunch, prep your dinner, have your snacks ready. And then, hey, Sunday, yeah, relax. Like if you want to get Uber Eats, then yeah, for sure do that. If you want to snack out, I know it's very hard not to snack when you're sitting at home. Like give yourself a limit though. If your crucifix is chocolate, have one block of chocolate and that's your block of chocolate for the week. If like you could get through that all on Monday, but then you don't get any more for the rest of the week, like learn how to space that out. Like if you can do those things, structure your eating, meal prep, and then like set your limits on your treats, like you should be able to get through COVID pretty unscathed, I'd say.
Okay, cool. Perfect. It's funny you bring up the Uber Eats thing. I saw a thing online the other day and it was like, my dietitian asked for my nutrition log, So I just printed my bank statement. I was like,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's spot on.
Cool. All right, man. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on. I know it took up a huge amount of your time today. So
No, cool. It's always a pleasure.
it's we'll have to make sure we hit another one of these again. Hopefully, once COVID's over and we can get back to doing what we all love. And we'll have to check back in again and see what's on for the rest of the year for you.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever you got time, man, always got time for you. So whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for coming on board.
Of course. Thanks for having me, bro.
Cheers, bro.